He rang the doorbell the way people do when they already have a key. 2 short presses and a pause. I was still in my slippers, halfway through reheating coffee. "Mom, you ready?" he called, like we were late for something pleasant. That's how my move to his house started. I told everyone I was doing it because of my knees, the stairs, the grocery bags I couldn't carry anymore. But truthfully, I said yes because I was tired of quiet. After my husband died, the house sounded like a refrigerator humming in another room, constant, faint, and lonely. So when Mark said, "You'll have your own room, your own space. It'll be good for both of us," I didn't think twice. He smiled so easily that day. I should have known charm like that always costs something. If you like stories about family, trust, and the quiet kind of danger that hides inside love, stick around. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. This one gets personal. Mark's wife Leela met me at the door with a dish towel still over her shoulder. The smell of garlic and detergent drifted out into the cold. "We're so glad you're here," she said, her voice soft but too rehearsed. The kitchen behind her gleamed like a commercial. No clutter, no crumbs, everything arranged in twos. They'd cleared a room for me at the end of the hall, the one facing the backyard. My boxes were stacked neatly against the wall, each labeled in Mark's handwriting. Linens, photos, office. He'd even taped little notes on the drawers, mom stuff. That part almost broke me. The first week was easy. We had dinners together, watched old crime shows, made jokes about my guest status. Mark insisted on setting up automatic payments for my prescriptions, said it'd save me trouble. "You shouldn't have to think about money anymore," he told me one evening while Leela refilled my tea. His tone sounded like care. His eyes looked like calculation. Still, I smiled. People don't want gratitude to sound suspicious. On the second Sunday, I woke before dawn. The house was quiet, except for the faint tapping of a keyboard. I followed the glow down the hall and found Mark at the dining table, my checkbook open beside his laptop. He didn't flinch. "Morning, Ma. Just sorting bills. You forgot to pay the gas last month." "I didn't forget," I said slowly. "I mailed it." He chuckled low. "They don't take mail anymore. Everything's online now." He closed the checkbook gently, like that ended the conversation. By breakfast, he'd printed out a stack of forms labeled Joint Access Authorization. Said the bank required it if he was going to handle things in emergencies. I told him I'd think about it. He kissed my cheek and said, "That's fine, Ma. We'll take our time." I noticed he didn't say, "You will take your time." That afternoon, Leela showed me how to use their smart speaker. "It's helpful. Just tell it what you need." She smiled, but her thumb lingered on the microphone button a little too long before handing it over. Later, when I asked the device to play my old jazz station, it said, "I'm sorry, this account no longer exists." For the first time since moving in, the house didn't feel warm. It felt wired. That night, I opened my notebook, the one I used to grade essays years ago, and started writing everything down. Dates, conversations, passwords I still remembered. Even the way Leela glanced at Mark before she spoke. It wasn't paranoia. It was muscle memory. Teachers learn early how to notice when someone's cheating. I had moved here to make life easier. I just hadn't realized whose life would benefit. The next morning, Mark asked if I'd thought about those bank forms. I said, I have, and I'll sign them when I'm dead. He laughed like I'd made a joke. You're funny, Ma. But the way his eyes hardened told me he'd heard the truth in it. That night, I found my mailbox key missing from the key hook. Probably fell, she said when I asked. Funny thing, I hadn't dropped a single thing since I got here. To be continued. Next part, I'll tell you what I found when the first bank notice came and why sometimes the most dangerous thief is the one who calls you Mom.
Before we go on, I'm curious, if your own family offered to take care of everything, would you let them? Be honest. Drop your answer in the comments before you hear how mine went. By the second month, I'd stopped setting my own alarm. Mark was up before me anyway, moving through the house like someone who'd been rehearsing the role of caretaker for years. I'd wake to the smell of coffee already poured, my pills lined up in one of those weekly plastic trays I hadn't asked for. Makes it easy, he said. It was easy. Too easy. He'd begun to handle everything, the mail, the appointments, even the thermostat. When I reached for the remote one evening, he smiled and said, I'll get that, you just rest. It sounded kind. It always sounded kind. The small freedoms disappeared first. My checkbook moved from the bedside table to the kitchen drawer, then vanished entirely. Lila started keeping my purse safe in the hall closet. She meant well, she said, didn't want me losing it again. I hadn't lost anything. Not yet. Dinner became a schedule. 6 sharp, 1 plate, 1 conversation. They talked about mortgage rates, new credit cards, tax strategies. I listened like a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. When I asked about my pension statement, Mark waved it off. They send everything digital now, he said, glancing toward his laptop. Digital's fine, I told him, as long as the digits add up. He chuckled, but didn't look up. A week later, my friend Nora from church called. She said my number had changed. Your son gave me this new one, she added, confused. Said you'd switched to his family plan. I thanked her and wrote that down too. New number, not mine. The notebook was filling fast. One night, I heard Mark and Lila whispering in the hallway. Just tell her it's temporary, she said. She'll come around, he replied. Their voices faded as a door clicked shut. Temporary what? The next morning, Mark mentioned downsizing. You could use something smaller, he said, while scrolling through listings on his tablet. Fewer stairs, lower taxes. I like my room, I answered. He smiled thinly. I meant in general. When I called the bank myself that afternoon, a polite woman told me my online access had been disabled for security. She said my son had verified it on my behalf. Verified what? I asked. Your identity, she replied. Funny things outsource. I started keeping a second notebook, smaller, that I hid behind the dresser. It wasn't fear that made me do it. It was instinct. Teachers grade twice when they don't trust their first mark. That night, I left the living room lamp on and pretended to sleep. Around 11, Mark's shadow passed by my door. He paused, listened, and then the hall light flicked on. I stayed still. In the morning, the lamp was off. By then, I'd memorized the sound of the mailbox lid, metal against metal, that brief clatter every noon. One day, it didn't come. When I asked, Mark said, "Oh, I pick it up now. The wind keeps scattering things." The wind had never signed anyone else's name before. I began walking to the corner cafe after breakfast, just to be alone somewhere that didn't echo. The waitress, June, called me sweetheart and refilled my cup without asking. She said she used to see my husband come in years ago, always carrying a newspaper. When she asked how I was settling in, I told her I was fine. Then I asked if she ever saw someone look after you so much it started to feel like theft. She didn't laugh, just nodded slowly. That night, I told Mark I wanted to go home for a few days, check on the old house. He frowned. "There's nothing left there, Ma. I took care of it." Took care of what? "The utilities, the insurance, everything's under control." He said it like a promise, but it sounded like a verdict. When he left the room, I dialed my neighbor from the old street, Helen, the one with the yellow porch. She sounded surprised. "Oh, hi! I thought you'd sold the place already." I stared at the wall a long time after that. The family photos, the neat handwriting on the labels, the careful way Lila had folded my sweaters, everything suddenly looked staged. If they'd already sold the house, I wasn't a guest here. I was property in transit.
I took the early bus back to my old neighborhood, the one with the maples that shed like slow confetti every fall. The driver didn't talk, and neither did I. I watched my reflection in the window, older than I felt, less breakable than I looked. When I stepped off on Willow Street, the air smelled like damp leaves and laundry soap. Helen, my neighbor with the yellow porch, was clipping dead geraniums out front. She saw me, waved too hard, then put the clippers down like they'd gotten suddenly heavy. "I was hoping you'd come by," she said. "Why?" Helen shifted. "There was a car here Saturday, a little sign on the lawn. Looked like one of those open house things, but only 2 people went in. They stayed a long time." "My house doesn't have open houses," I said. "I know." We stood there a minute longer than it took to breathe. "I still have the spare key you gave me," she added carefully. "I never used it after the funeral. Didn't feel right." I didn't answer, just looked past her shoulder. My place sat exactly where it always had, stubborn and small, with the porch rail Mark never got around to repainting. But the front door wore something new, a metal lockbox hanging from the knob like an ornament that wasn't invited. "Let's take the back way," I said. We cut through the narrow strip of grass between our houses. The gate stuck the same way it always had and squealed the same complaint when I forced it. The kitchen windows were shut. A single flyer had wedged itself under the storm door, thinking of selling, with a cheerful, smiley house that made my teeth hurt. Helen hovered. "You want me to stay?" "Please." I tried my key. The deadbolt didn't budge. Someone had changed it. The side door was the same. We circled to the garage, where the padlock was new and shinier than it had any right to be. "Could be a mistake," Helen said, "because good people feel obliged to offer hope even when it's thin as thread." "Could be," I said. The mailbox was jammed with glossy coupons and the last 2 months of bills. Tucked between them sat a thin, important-feeling envelope stamped "Address Change Confirmation."
The new addressing address wasn't mine. It wasn't Mark's either. It was a box number across town. "Who signed for that?" Helen asked. "Doesn't say." She touched my sleeve. "You want to sit for a minute?" "I want a library with working printers," I said. The branch a few blocks over had a row of computers that smelled like sanitizer and old paper. A librarian with soft gray hair showed me how to pull up the county recorder's site. I typed in my parcel number from memory. It felt like reciting a prayer. The tax page loaded with a little spinning circle that took longer than patience. Then it arrived. Owner of record, Evelyn M. Cole. That was still me. Mailing address, the same box number from the letter. Beneath that, a line I'd never seen before. Transfer pending intake. "What does that mean?" I asked the librarian. She leaned in, squinted. "It means someone submitted documents, but they haven't been officially recorded yet. There's often a lag." "Who can submit those documents?" I said. "Anyone who owns it or thinks they do." She looked at me. "Or someone acting on their behalf." I wrote it down. I wrote down the time stamp, the fee amount, the file code. I printed 2 copies and slipped them in a manila folder the librarian pressed into my hand without making me ask. "Take it, dear. We always have extras." At the next computer, I pulled up my bank. The login screen looked exactly the same, except it no longer recognized me. When I clicked Forgot Password, it told me to contact the administrator of my account. "Administrator?" I said out loud. The librarian pretended not to hear. I tried the credit union next. That one still let me in after the 3rd try and a long, humiliating dance with security questions. Instantly, a pop-up jumped onto the screen. "We noticed unusual activity. Please verify your recent changes." There was a new authorized user listed. Not me. I found the phone number buried at the bottom of the page and stepped outside to call. The woman who answered sounded half my age and twice as tired. "This is Evelyn Cole," I said. "I need to freeze every account attached to my name." She asked for details. I gave her specific answers like I was measuring flour, exact, leveled off. When she asked if I had recently added an authorized user, I said no, the way you do when you run out of polite. "Ma'am, I can place an immediate hold, but if there's a power of something document on file." "Power of attorney?" "Yes, if there's one recorded, I'll need." "There isn't," I said. "There isn't," I repeated, because sometimes the second time is for you. She paused. "Then I'll set a verbal passphrase that overrides outside access. Pick a phrase you won't forget." I smiled despite myself. "How about, 'I'm still here'?" "That'll do," she said. I took the folder and walked to June's cafe. She poured coffee like medicine. When I told her what the county site said, she set the pot down too hard and muttered something unkind about sons. I pretended not to hear. "You want my booth by the window?" she asked. "It's quieter." "I need an outlet and a pen that doesn't skip." "You can have both," she said, and brought me a handful of black ballpoints like she was arming me for war. I called the county recorder next. A man named Reed answered, cheerful in the way people are when they haven't learned to be suspicious yet. I gave him my parcel number. He put me on hold long enough for my coffee to cool, then came back sounding newly cautious. "The intake is electronic," he said. "I can't disclose documents without a formal request, but I will say there's a durable delegation attached." "English," I said. "Something that lets someone sign for you," he said.
They usually bring ID to a notary. And if I didn't sign it, he said quickly, then you should file a dispute today, and you should call your police department. Also call your title insurance if you have any. I have a notebook, I said. That's a start. He gave me instructions I wrote like a recipe, steps, copies, fees, offices I could reach by bus. Before he let me go, he lowered his voice. Ma'am, if anyone asks you to sign anything just for records, don't. I said they already stopped asking. They assumed. When I walked back to my old house, Helen was on her porch with 2 cups of tea and her coat zipped to her chin. You look like you know something, she said. I know enough. I told her about the pending transfer, about the durable delegation, about the new address and the lockbox and the bank that believed in administrators. Do you want me to call my nephew? She asked. He's a realtor. He could spot a fake sign a mile away. No more nephews. We sat there a while, not saying the thing we were both thinking, that sometimes the people you make are the people who unmake you. When did you last see the inside? She asked finally. The day after the funeral. I came to water the fern, took the letters and left the kitchen clean. I didn't say goodbye. Maybe you don't have to, she said. Maybe you just have to stand your ground. Standing is the easy part. It's the ground that's moving. A white sedan rolled to a stop in front of my house. A woman in a blazer stepped out, checked her phone, and tried the front door like she belonged to it. When it didn't open, she crouched at the lockbox, tapped a code, and frowned. Helen sucked air in through her teeth. Don't, I said, putting a hand on her sleeve. Let's see who she calls. The woman called someone and said the word access twice. Then she took a photo of the porch, one of the door, and one of the number on the lockbox. Before she left, she slipped a business card through the mail slot with the confidence of a person certain she'd return. When the car finally pulled away, I crossed the lawn and fished the card out with 2 fingers.
Cordelia Sloan, title and settlement. The name sounded like a perfume and a warning. On the back, in tidy letters, she had written, Confirm appointment Friday, 9:30 a.m. Appointment for what? Helen asked. For finishing what somebody started, I said. I slid the card into the folder with the county printouts and the bank hold confirmation and the phrase, I'm still here, written in thick pen at the top. Back at Mark's house, dinner tasted like nothing. He asked about my day while Leela ladled soup. I said I'd seen Helen and the trees and the old red mailbox. I said I'd missed the creak in the floor by the sink that always scared visiting dogs. That floor needed fixing years ago, Mark said. If we redo it before listing. Before what? I asked, too evenly. He blinked. Before winter, before the holidays. You hate the cold. I took a slow sip of water. I filed a hold on my accounts today, and I spoke to the county, and I set a password at the credit union you can't pronounce. He smiled a careful smile. Mom, you don't need to get upset. I'm trying to help. Good, I said. Then you'll help me get into my house Friday at 9:30. Leela looked from him to me and back like a spectator who'd missed the start of the game. What's Friday? She asked. An appointment someone made with my life, I said. I plan to attend. Mark's jaw flickered. You're misunderstanding. I'm reading, I said, tapping the folder, and I'm memorizing. That's worse. He picked up his spoon, set it down again, and changed the subject to the thermostat like we were talking about weather. We ate like people who pretend food can fix things. That night, I put my smaller notebook and the manila folder into my tote bag. I added the spare key Helen had kept for years and a copy of my driver's license and the utility bill with my name large as a billboard. I set the bag by the door and sat in the dark a while, listening to the refrigerator hum and the house breathe. At 11:30, the hall light came on. Mark's steps moved to the kitchen, paused by the hook where my keys hang now, then continued to the living room. He stood there long enough to make a point to nobody. When the light went off, he kept the silence between us like a plate he didn't want to drop. I didn't sleep. I wrote dates on the inside cover of the notebook and drew a little box next to Friday, 9:30 a.m. I shaded the box in. At 7:02 the next morning, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring, then watched it light up again. On the third try, a text arrived. "Mrs. Cole, this is Cordelia Sloan. Please confirm you'll be present to acknowledge the deed transfer. If you cannot attend, your agent may sign." I stared at the words, acknowledge, agent, transfer. I typed slowly, then deleted, then typed again. "I'll be there." 3 dots pulsed. Excellent. Bring ID. I put the phone face down and closed my eyes. When I opened them, I could picture the porch of my house, the lockbox, the door that used to stick in summer and swell in rain. I could hear my husband's laugh bouncing off the hallway in a memory that felt like a trick. I poured coffee, sat at the table, and wrote one more sentence at the top of the page. If they built a door without me, I'll still be the one who walks through it. Friday morning came gray and cold, the kind of morning that didn't promise anything good. I'd slept maybe 2 hours, kept dreaming of lockboxes clicking open and voices I couldn't place saying, "Just sign here, Mrs. Cole." I left before anyone else was awake. The house was still, too still. On the counter, Mark had left a sticky note. "Picked up groceries, be back by noon. No love you, no mom, just errands." I tucked my tote under my arm, folder inside, keys around my wrist like brass armor. The bus ride downtown took 22 minutes and one lifetime's worth of thinking. The address on the business card led me to a low building with mirrored windows. Suite 206, Cordelia Sloan, Title and Settlement Services. She looked exactly as I'd pictured. Smart blazer, tidy bun, that polite confidence of someone who knows she's about to tell you something you won't like. "Mrs. Cole," she greeted me, standing to shake my hand. "Glad you could make it. Please have a seat." The office smelled like lemon polish and printer ink. Behind her desk, a man in a gray suit shuffled papers. "Before we begin," she said smoothly, "I'll just need to verify your ID for the deed acknowledgement." I handed her my license. She studied it a little too long. "I see," she said quietly. "I remember this signature." "You should, because I didn't sign it." Her eyes flicked up. "I'm sorry? You notarized a document with my name, power of attorney, property transfer, the whole package, except it wasn't me." The man in the gray suit froze. "Cordelia, I'd like a copy of every paper you've handled with my name on it," I continued, calm as prayer. "Now." Cordelia's face drained a shade paler.
I'll need to call my supervisor. Call whoever you need, but don't call my son. He's the reason I'm here. By noon, I was sitting in a different office across the street, law offices of Edward Feldman, who still had his name on the door after 50 years. He looked like a man carved out of paper and coffee. When I told him everything, he didn't interrupt. Lawyers who have lived long enough know that silence does more work than sympathy. He said, "Do you have documentation?" And I handed over the folder. Dates, names, parcel numbers, even the coffee stain. It's all there. He read. He whistled under his breath when he hit Cordelia's signature. "That's bad. That's real bad," he muttered. "So what happens now?" First, he said, we file a notary misconduct complaint. Then we dispute the transfer with the county clerk. Once that's in motion, we contact the police, fraud division. This is elder financial abuse, plain and simple. I nodded. Good. I've been plain and simple my whole life. Detective Adair looked too young for her badge, but old enough for the exhaustion in her eyes. She recorded everything, my statement, the documents, Cordelia's card, the printout from the county site. "Your son filed all this?" she asked. "Yes." "And you never gave him permission, not even a hint." She leaned back, chewing on her pen cap. "You'd be surprised how common this is, Mrs. Cole. People trust family, and family learns what trust is worth." I'm not surprised, just disappointed. She half smiled. "We'll start by freezing the transaction. I'll need you to sign a formal complaint." "I'm good at signing things," I said. "Finally, it'll be for myself." When I got home, Mark's car was in the driveway. Leela was at the sink, pretending to rinse dishes that didn't need rinsing. "How was your day, Ma?" he asked from the living room. "Productive." He muted the TV. "Cordelia called me, said you made quite a scene." "Did she also tell you she confessed?" He blinked. "What?" I said she admitted someone else signed my name, setting my tote down. "Her office is under investigation. So is yours." His face changed. First shock, then calculation, then that cold, quiet anger of someone realizing the check won't clear. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he said. "I was helping yourself. I cut in to my house, my money, my trust." Leela turned off the faucet and whispered, "Mark." He didn't look at her. "You'd rather lose everything than let me fix it." "Lose," I said softly. "You already tried that part." He stood so fast the chair scraped the floor. "You don't understand what it's like. The bills, the kids, the pressure." "Then you should have asked," I said, "not forged." He opened his mouth, then shut it. His hands clenched, then loosened. "They're going to arrest me, aren't they?" "I don't know. That depends on whether you keep lying." He took his coat and walked out the back door. No slammed doors this time, just footsteps fading into November air. Leela sat across from me. "I didn't know," she said. Her voice cracked on the last word. "He said you wanted it that way, that you didn't want to deal with papers anymore." I studied her. She looked tired, small, scared in a way that wasn't performance. I said, "People believe what's easiest. That's how this works." "Do you want me to pack his things?" she asked. "Not yet. Let him pack what's his. That'll take about 5 minutes. That night I made tea and sat by the window, folder on my lap. The street was quiet, only a few porch lights left burning. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt something harder to name, something like waiting. At 9:17, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but habit won. "Mrs. Cole," the voice said, "this is Detective Adair. We served the warrant. There's something you should see." "What is it?" She hesitated. "It's another property document, one your son filed 2 months ago. Different address, different county." My throat dried. "Under my name?" "Yes. And it's not just yours. There are others." I looked out into the dark where the porch light glowed like a secret that refused to die. "Send me the file," I said. "If he built a pattern, I'll finish the math."
The email from Detective Adair arrived before sunrise. The subject line was simple: additional records for review. I opened it with coffee in one hand and a notebook in the other. 2 PDFs were attached. Both carried my name, both notarized, both false. The second property wasn't even in this county. It was a small rental house an hour north. The document listed Evelyn M. Cole, primary owner, except I'd never owned anything there. I stared at the screen until my reflection blurred into the glare. Fraud didn't travel alone. It brought company. I dialed Adair. "We've confirmed 3 instances," she said. "Your son's name appears on all of them as agent or transferee. He's not just moving your property, he's replicating your identity." "I'm not surprised," I said, just finally ready. She exhaled. "We'll need a sworn affidavit for the district attorney. The case qualifies for elder financial exploitation and forgery. Do you want to press charges?" "Of course I do," I said. "He wanted to erase me. Let's make sure I'm seen." Feldman's office smelled like dust and victory that morning. He poured black coffee into a chipped mug, then slid the affidavit toward me. "Read it twice, then sign." I did. Each paragraph felt heavier than the last. By the time I reached the bottom, the signature line looked like a finish line I'd been running toward for months. The pen didn't tremble. "Good," Feldman said, tapping the paper. "This one stays with us. The police have copies. Now comes the part where you breathe." "I'll breathe when my name's back where it belongs," I said. That afternoon, Clara arrived. Not my daughter, my granddaughter. I hadn't seen her in weeks, though she'd been calling. She hugged me like she meant it. "I heard about Dad," she said. "Detective Adair called. I can't believe it." I said, "You can. You just don't want to." She nodded, eyes wet, but steady. "He always thought shortcuts were smart. Guess he forgot they leave tracks." We sat in the kitchen, the same place I'd sat with Mark months earlier, back when I still believed kindness was the same thing as love. Clara reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You did everything right, Grandma. Most people freeze or get scared. You fought." "I kept notes," I said. "Teachers always keep notes." She laughed, just enough to make the air move again. The courthouse smelled like floor wax and nerves. Feldman walked beside me, carrying the case file like a priest carries scripture. Clara followed, her chin high, her phone recording everything for reference. Mark sat at the other table. He looked smaller, thinner. Lila wasn't with him. Maybe she'd finally drawn her own line. When the judge entered, the room settled. Her robe was navy, not black, practical, lived in. She scanned the file, then looked at Mark. "Mr. Cole, you are accused of executing fraudulent property transfers and power of attorney documents without consent. Do you understand the charges?" He swallowed. "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you contest your mother's claim?" He hesitated. I was trying to help her." The judge's eyes sharpened. "By forging her signature? By selling assets she didn't authorize?" He said nothing. She turned to me. "Mrs. Cole, you've provided evidence of financial abuse, notarized falsifications, and bank records. Is there anything you'd like to add?" I looked at Mark. "Just that love isn't ownership, and help without respect is theft with manners." Feldman glanced sideways at me,
the corner of his mouth twitching upward. The judge nodded once. The court recognizes Mrs. Cole as the rightful owner of the disputed properties. All transfers are void. The defendant's actions are referred to the district attorney for prosecution. It was done. Not undone, but done enough. Back home, the first letter from the county arrived. Deed reinstated. No ribbon, no apology, just ink and truth. I placed it on the kitchen table and made tea. The house sounded different now. Not hollow, not afraid, just lived in again. Clara came by that evening with the grocery bag and a grin. I got the good bread, the kind Grandpa liked. We ate in the garden, near the rose bush that hadn't bloomed in years. The wind had that crisp edge that reminds you time keeps moving whether you're ready or not. I'm proud of you, Clara said quietly. I'm proud of us, I corrected. You helped me remember I'm not alone. A week later, an envelope arrived addressed in handwriting I knew too well. Mom, it began. I never meant for it to go this far. I thought I was fixing things. I thought I could make it right later. I see now I don't get to decide that. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. I read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer with my will and the reinstated deed. Forgiveness isn't a gift. It's a boundary you draw for yourself. Now I sit by the window most evenings, the same spot where this all began. The house hums like it used to, steady and small. The porch light glows warm, and I leave it on, not as a welcome, but as a warning. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Betrayal doesn't crash through the door. It rings the bell and smiles. And when it does again, for someone else, in some other quiet kitchen, I hope they remember my story and they answer differently. Because sometimes survival isn't about who you trust. It's about who you stop trusting in time.